What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Journey Podcast. I have a very interesting episode for you guys today as we are going to talk about psychedelics out in the desert, specifically LSD. This weekend, I took a trip out with my boys and we did a camping trip out in the Anza Borrego Desert in California. And I'm pretty much just going to walk you through the entire trip because I know a lot of you guys like hearing about psychedelics. You guys have a lot of questions, and I always find it helpful for me to share my own experiences so that way you guys can form your own opinion as well. Now, this is not an educational podcast. This is not me condoning the use of psychedelics. This is simply just a retelling of my own personal experience and it was like for me, and also what I learned on this trip as well. So, if you guys have questions, feel free to DM me with any of your psychedelic questions. I do have a couple other episodes down at the beginning of the podcast. One's called What I Learned Microdosing LSD, and then also another one about MDMA in the mountains. And I'm going to have a couple other trips too. I don't do LSD very often, but when I do, it's always profound. I always learn something and I always am excited to share my experiences. So we're going to go ahead and dive into it here. Now, we started this trip. It was me and four of my friends. I'll keep their name anonymous, but it was me and four of my friends. We went out into the desert, which is about 3 hours away from where we currently live in San Diego. And we really didn't have a plan. Really, what we just wanted to do is just have a boys' trip, go out, hang out, drop some LSD, and just kind of, enjoy the weekend, all of us together, unplugged from the world. We went out there. We had no service, so we couldn't contact anybody. It was completely unplugged. Half the time I didn't even have my phone on me, so that was really, really awesome to start with. But when we got there, we set up camp. We pretty much had a campsite to ourselves. The way that Anza Borrego works is that it's pretty much all open for camping. You can park anywhere that you want on any given turnout, and you can just stop and pitch up a tent. There's no rangers. There's no nothing. Like, you can just park on the side of the road and camp there. So we got into the desert. We pulled off on one of the roads. We found a campsite. We pitched our tent and set up shop. Now, the next morning is when we dropped acid. We woke up at 6:30 a.m. and overnight was pretty interesting. We can hear like jackrabbits, we can hear owls hooting, we can hear rats screaming their death cry from the owls that they're being eaten up in the night. We woke up, it was very peaceful, and you can tell that the world was asleep still. There wasn't any bugs out, there wasn't any life. You can really just feel that everything was still asleep. It was that early. We got up, we ate breakfast, and around 8 o'clock in the morning, we all took our dose. So two of my friends took a full dose. I took a half dose. One of my other friends took a half dose as well. And the reason why I took a half dose is just because that's intense enough for me. I have taken full doses in the past, and it is a little bit too intense. Now, my two friends that took full doses, they said it was, they had an intense time, but like they're fine. And they had a fine time too. For me, I just know myself. I like to feel it, but I don't like to be out of my mind. So I took a half dose. And we started going hiking. So this was around 8 o'clock in the morning. We were waiting for it to kick in. We started hiking up along the ridge as the acid was starting to kick in. And, we were looking at rocks. We're looking over the horizon. We can see the sunrise. And then we get to the absolute top of the mountain where we're able to oversee this valley. I didn't explain the location very well, but essentially we were in this pocket imagine like a huge mountain range. We drove over the mountain range to get to our destination, and on the other side of the mountain range there's a huge open valley that's just desert. It's all flat, it's all like ever expanding, it's huge. So as we crossed over the top of the mountain range, we stopped at the top, maybe a couple miles down from the top of the mountain range. So we were still a ways away from the bottom of that mountain range before the valley started getting like growing. So we had a huge view of this massive valley, this desert valley. And so we were walking along the ridge of this mountain range, and we can see, the valley. And, this was, we felt like we were like some time had passed, and the acid started to kick in, and we started just talking about random stuff. And at first it was really, really goofy. It was really funny. Like, when you take acid, you get this rush of energy and these giggles. Now, I don't smoke weed very often. Actually, I don't smoke weed at all, just simply because I get too paranoid. I get really self-conscious and I don't like how I feel on weed. But when I take acid, I get really giggly. It feels like there's bubbles in my stomach. Like I just feel this energy that's just like makes me happy and laugh. And I know me and my friends are at the top of the mountain. We're just cracking jokes with each other, just absolutely laughing. And then we started talking about just like interesting theories about life and death and the beginning of civilization and like, how have advanced as humans. And also we're just questioning like reality. I don't know. We don't have answers for this kind of stuff when it comes to like spiritualness or, what reality is. But we started questioning about this stuff and kind of just sharing theories of what we thought was like what reality was. And one of my friends ended up throwing up because he started to get sick. I don't know if it was because of what we were talking about. He started to doubt, but he threw up. And that's when we realized like, oh shit, we're about to get really freaking out of our minds here pretty second. And at first I thought that because of my friend throwing up, was going to cause some type of bad trip for him or us. It didn't. It was totally fine. He just threw up because his stomach was, I don't even know the reason why he threw up. But at that point, we realized like, oh, this stuff is actually really going to start to kick in. We should make it down the mountain to our campsite. Now, at this point, it was getting pretty damn hot. Like we brought some water, but like we were sweating. It was hot. So we get down to the campsite, and remember, we're in the desert here. So there's no lush trees. The sun is beating down on us. We're sweating. We get down to the campsite and realize there's no shade anywhere. And we're like tripping now. We're like, oh shit, we're like really tripping. And we want to be able to enjoy this trip, but we have like no shade. So we grab some water, we grab some food, and we try to just find anywhere to sit. We end up finding this tree as a couple feet away, like 50 to 100 feet away from our campsite. And we all just sit under the tree. And now this is where we actually just kind of sit down and trip, and we just have our trip, and we're tripping, and we just go into these waves of losing our mind and then being sucked back to reality, and then losing our mind and being sucked back to reality. And it's really funny because we're all in the same exact frequency, and we'd be cracking jokes, we'd be laughing, there'd be something really funny. We'd be like, hey, look at our hands, or hey, look at the ground. We'd just be laughing so much. And then we'd all shut up. And we'd be quiet for like what felt like 5 to 10 minutes. It's really all only a minute. And one of us would go, holy shit, that was crazy. And we'd all go like, whoa, like we'd all just snap back into it. And essentially what was happening was we would just get lost in these loops in our mind. When you're on these drugs, you have to realize like not only are you having a fun time, but your mind will also start to take you places that are really kind of scary and dark. And even though I had a great time, I also saw some shit that I didn't really want to see. And during this time, I was being shown things about my life that like I really did not, like really just didn't want to see, but I needed to see it. Essentially what happens is you look at different relationships in your life through a different lens. You look at different actions that you've taken with a different lens. And a lot of them kind of just show you stuff about yourself that you might not be prepared to see, and might like really question yourself. And for myself, I felt extremely guilty and extremely shameful for, things that I don't want to say things that I've done, maybe how I've treated relationships in the past. Like, and I'm going to get really personal here. I'll open up. I'm not a perfect person, guys. I have made mistakes in the past. I'm a human being just like any other human being. And so I was looking at relationships, ones that were close to me, like my relationship with my girlfriend, for example, or my relationship with my sister, or my relationship with my mother. And I would just see how I would act and be like, I really don't like how I was acting here. Or like, I really don't like how I am, like the role that I'm playing in this relationship. Like, I know I can be better. I know I can, do better by this person. And, I'm not going to go into specifics, but I just felt like I just get overwhelmed with this emotion of guilt and shame. And I'm like, I really need to change my ways. And it made me feel really like, almost like I just wanted to run home and hug my girlfriend and tell her that like, hey, I love you and I'm sorry and I want to be with you forever. And, these are all things that I already know, but it really just confirmed things I already know, but it also made me question relationships about myself and how I respond to other people. And it's a lot to take in if you're not prepared for that kind of stuff. It's not like you can just go in and not choose not to have it, because that is part of the experience. And we knew that was part of the experience too. And so we would all be going into these trips and like we'd come out and be like, holy shit. And then we'd, joke around and have some fun. And then we'd go back in and then just zone out and trip out and then come back and be like, oh my God, like that was crazy. And what felt like 3 hours passed. We're like, oh, it must be like 12 o'clock now. We've literally just been sitting under this tree this whole time. Like, let's check the time. We checked the time, 9 o'clock. Not even an hour had passed by. And that's when all of us realized, like, dude, we are in for a long day because we didn't bring any games. We didn't bring any like music. We didn't bring anything with us. So our only plan was just to sit there hour by hour in this state and just write it out. And that was when I realized, I'm like, we're kind of stupid for coming out here and like thinking that we're just going to sit out here and have no plan and like just be out here. And it was starting to get really hot. And that's when we all kind of realized like, wow, we have a really long day ahead of us. And from there, life started waking up. It's pretty beautiful to see. We're in this desert by ourselves. The bugs started to come out. The birds started to come out. The animals started to come out. We're sitting under this tree and we're seeing the birds like get into the tree and we're using the tree and it was crazy. I can see the leaves on the tree and you can see the veins of the tree and you can just feel the life in the tree and the life that the tree provides for all the animals that were using the tree and the home that tree provided. And we would see like blue jays that would come and check us out and look at us like, who are these people in our home? And then bugs would come out and fly around us and check us out. And we would see like birds flying through the valley looking, and I'm like, for me personally, I'm like, there's so much life here out in the desert and we are just part of that life. Like that, the life doesn't revolve around us. We are just one in the entirety of life. And I know I might sound crazy, but if you ever taken LSD, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The craziest thing was looking at the trees and seeing how much life there was, not only in the tree, but the life that the tree provides for other animals. It was freaking crazy. We start tripping out on that kind of stuff and, check the phone again, 9:10. We're like, all right, we are in this for a while. Long story short, we sit there and we trip out for 3 hours, and it was a very long, excruciating process because, like I mentioned before, you're just shown things that you're not quite sure, are real, and you're also like question yourself. I can look back now in hindsight with what I saw and what I discovered about myself on that trip and think about it in a different lens and think, no, like, I think part of what I saw was true, but honestly, at the same time, it's also not true. So you have to do some type of integration after where you sit down and journal about what you've seen and about what you've learned about yourself. And it can be pretty intense. I highly recommend if you're going to do a trip, anything like this, don't do it in a social setting where you have to be normal. That is probably the worst situation that you could possibly do. Being out in the desert with a couple friends who are on the same level as me was amazing. We made sure that we had shade. We made sure that we had water. We made sure that we had food. And so everything that we needed to keep our body safe was absolutely present. But we also were in a safe environment to where we can just trip out and not have to worry about, responsibilities or doing normal things. And, we just really made sure it was an environment in where we were safe and we wouldn't have a bad trip. But after the peak, essentially, that's when things started to get more fun. The trip in total lasted about 8 hours. It was about from 8 o'clock to about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, maybe 5 o'clock. I don't know. It lasted pretty long, but the peak of the trip lasted until about 12 o'clock. And after the peak passed, we were able to actually remove ourselves from this tree and we were able to hike. We were able to explore. And while we were able to hike and explore, those episodes of loops would come back and, we would see visuals and stuff, but it would just be this cycle of like laughing and giggling and having a good time, then zoning out and be like, whoa, just like things about my life are being shown to me that I am not prepared for. And then we'd come back and snap out of it and everyone would be like, all right, are we back? Like everyone's good. And after that 12 o'clock, we just started hiking around. We would climb rocks, we would shoot the shit, make jokes and have fun. And then it pretty much was that until the sun went down and the bugs went to sleep. And, I know this is going to sound crazy, but it really felt like I saw the beginning of human civilization. And, I kind of saw reality for what it was. Like we're just on this rock and we're living life. And, the experience that we have is simply just the experience that we have. And, everyone's experience is just life. Like no one has a better experience than someone else. I don't know if this is making sense. It makes a lot of sense in my head after experiencing it, but answers just come up to you, things just start to make sense. And you also get shown shit that you're not quite prepared to see. I definitely have a lot of work on myself that I need to do to be a better human. Not saying that I'm a bad human. I try to do as much good as I possibly can, but I know there's definitely ways I can improve it and be even better. So hope you guys found this episode enlightening. If you guys ever have any questions, you can always feel free to reach out to me. But like I mentioned, I'm not an expert. I don't have the answers. Also not condoning this. Just wanted to share my experience, what I learned and what it was like. So hope you guys found this episode helpful. We'll catch you guys in the next one.